Alright, say it with me. Son, you're gonna drive me to drinking if you don't stop driving that hot rod. Lincoln Mark 8. Check in at number 3 on my list as one of the best budget builds of the last 5 years. And again, this has been data I've been searching and looking at ever since 2021. So I guess I'm cheating a little bit as we're fast forwarding a hair into 2025. But there are many reasons why I don't like these cars. Now the downside to them, as I understand, if you're like me, if you get annoyed by like all the little things that are wrong, these cars aren't for you because they have with all the luxury items in the cabin and everything's electronic, this, that, and the other. Just get used to warning lights going off all over the place. Now, it doesn't necessarily always mean there's a mechanical problem. It's because there's, like I said, there's just things like, for instance, and we'll get into this later, but the factory airbag system, if there's a default on one of the sensors, warning light. But anyway, we will just get right into it and pop up the EA Sports scorecard. And let's talk about why this is one of the top 5 budget builds. We start, as always, with platform availability as we scour Facebook Marketplace and try to figure out how many times what's the frequency, how many times do these show up in a search. And my goodness, they are littered all over the place now. Again, if you want a project car with not 180,000 miles, maybe again this isn't the platform for you, but if you're just looking for that cheap entry point into getting V8 power rear wheel drive, my goodness, you got options galore. So we are scoring this a 4 on platform availability, as there are no shortage of them, at least in my region. And again, we're calling my region basically Dakotas, Iowa, Missouri, Northwest Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas. So anyway, I bet you'll still find similar trends wherever you're at in the country. All right, next up we're going with junkyard availability or used parts availability. Now this one's a little trickier. Because there are so many, you would think there would eventually then be the similar amount in junkyards, but they're just now getting to the point where they're 30 years old. So you'll start to see them more and more, but I downgrade them a little bit too because as opposed to the previous 2 vehicles we talked about, the Dodge first gen Rams and the Chrysler C-bodies, when you think about things like front bumpers, for instance, now that we're talking about an ABS plastic molding, and it's got to be color matched to whatever yours is, that kind of is not the same as being able to go to the junkyard and find a straight front chrome bumper like for one of those aforementioned vehicles. So they're just little nuances like that make them not as good from that aspect, but we're still going to score them a 3 because it's not that hard to find them. And then also there are a little bit of carryover parts between the cousin platforms like the Ford Thunderbird, the Mercury Cougar of that era, as well as a little bit of the SN95 Mustang. Per the usual, our third criteria is engine performance modifications, and this one it's a little tricky. So if you remember right, like the 4.6 liter in these cars is the 4-valve version, so it's basically a poor man's, or I guess it back then was rich man's version of Mustang Cobra. In a luxury car package. So the parts availability is tricky here. Like, I'm not going to flash up the usual intake manifold price because it's actually what a lot of people do is they go try to find an intake manifold from a 96 to 98 Mustang Cobra and swap it on over to their Mark 8s. So it's kind of a crossover from our last criteria into this one. It's not as simple as finding the parts that work on Crown Vics. This will come over here. So the point is that it's not impossible to make them go fast, but it's not as easy as just ordering parts out of a catalog like some of the other in the top 5. So for that reason alone, we are scoring it a 3. So we'll just move on to brakes and steering and suspension. And this one's a tough one to grade because, well, in some ways, like for budget build purpose, these cars come with airbags as it is, and so that's manipulating the stock system, which is prone to problems anyway. You can kind of, in a cheap way, get good stance. But because it's always broken and you got to fix it, maybe that's kind of a nuisance. So they do actually make coil over conversion kits, and they're really not that expensive. This 1-inch lowering static drop kit. Not a ton of options out there, but easy to manipulate. So if you just want to like get the looks without the performance, easy to do. And if you love tinkering with stuff, like you can upgrade the system and like fix the prone issues, you know, little thises and that's, probably for not a lot of money either. Now on the brake side of things, again, it's really kind of inconclusive. I mean, it's not like the brakes are bad to begin with, so it's not like one that for a budget build you'd have to upgrade, but there's not a lot out there. It's unclear to me whether or not you can really transpose SN95 brake kits over on these cars or not. So anyway, as you encompass all of that, like, I guess I could give it a 3, but it feels kind of more right to score it a 2. That all said, I think the Lincoln Mark 8 as a whole package is a good candidate for a budget build here in 2025. I think the real trick here is because of the engine performance, like not a bad starting point motor, not a great aftermarket for it in its exact condition. Like sure, you can still pull over Mustang, Cobra tips and tricks over here, but I think the real trick is if you can just get creative with how to shave weight on these cars. I think that's where the budget build fun is going to be. Let the little air out of the airbags, get a nice wheel tire package, get a cool sounding exhaust, and like I said, shave some weight, like just strip things out of the trunk and whatnot. If you haven't already figured it out by now, we've got over here numbers 4 and 5. Check in next week and we will drop number 2. Or if you're watching this like a year from now, you can just probably watch them all together. But hey, I just want to say thanks for tuning in. And to all my 6 fans out there, thanks for watching.